Good evening. Welcome to the Township Board of Trustees meeting for Tuesday, August 28th. Mr. Massey, would you lead us in the pledge?
Yes. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'll ask for a motion for the approval of both the consent agenda and the agenda.
Support. Motion, Mr. Supervisor.
Second.
There's been a motion and support. Any discussion?
Discussion?
Kathy?
Oh,
Mr.
I'm
Mansour?
sorry.
Mr. Mansour?
Let me go with the consent agenda. So on page 7 of the packet, there was a $5,450 expense for Revise LLC. And I guess I'd like to understand what that is about. Maybe it's been reviewed before, but what basically the benefit is for the township versus the cost.
So I can answer that question. Revise has to do with the people who create our website, and we're in the middle of a website redesign. So while the website redesign is absolutely 100% free, if we just stayed with what we had, they'd redesign it and move, but we're adding some different functionalities to our website. One of the things that got picked up in that cost were some websites within a website, namely Police Department, Fire Department, and Parks and Recreation. So that will cover the design of those websites within a website. It also covers a new feature for contact with citizens, so that when they go in to file a complaint or an issue, there's a thing on there that when they click on it, it's going to bring it up, and you check a box. It's completely form fillable. Is it a building complaint, planning and zoning, code enforcement, issue with an employee, police department, fire? I mean, is there just a road report, whatever? And depending on where they check that box, when they fill out their complaint, they hit submit. That automatically directs to where we want it directed to, which department we want it directed to, and then a copy comes to me so I can keep a log of all complaints filed and make sure that we're doing the follow-up within 24 hours, which is our internal policy. So it's a whole new website redesign, and it's just the new functionalities that we're incorporating into our website redesign.
So does this save us money or improve responsiveness? I mean, what's the end benefit for the public?
Primarily, if you look at our website now, there's been some functionality that we don't love on it, and what we spent about a 6-month period reviewing a bunch of other people's website to see what you really want to do is make a website that people will actually use. Right now, ours is a list of words or a list of links, and you look down and you just see a bunch of words. Yeah. This one is actually engaging. It's much more engaging for the public. It brings them in, makes it more interactive, makes it more government accessible to people. And certainly it makes us more responsible with just in the citizen reporting module that we picked up alone. But also, if you think of fire, police, they're not going to have their own website. We want those websites within a website. And then with Parks and Recreation, they have one, but they have to pay every time that they're going to have something done with it. Now that's all incorporated within ours. It's really it's a unique design. They can post it as their own. If somebody looks up Blanc Parks and Rec, they can find them on their own. But it also links back to their website, which will be, the domain is the same as Blanc Township. So we have full control over all of those websites in one easy place.
So let me ask just to kind of find out that. So first of all, is there an ongoing expense for this?
Well, there is maintenance fees for your website. I mean, they maintain it for us. So when we are changing functionalities or doing something, certainly there's maintenance fees associated with that. But the comparison to go out for complete design, we got a free design out of this deal. If we would have done that somewhere else, we would have paid somebody a considerable amount of money to redesign our website. We stayed with the company that we already had the contract with. Our contract was expiring. And so as part of that, it was one free website redesign, so we took advantage of that.
So
and actually, Mr. Mansour, I had one of the first things I talked to Mr. Lehman about was our website,
okay.
and he shared the concern, and it was actually, to his credit, he actually found in our contract where we were owed a free
redesign
renovation of our website, rather than we were looking at, hey, we've got to go out and find somebody, and come to find out, we already had this in our contract.
So let me just a final thing here. So would this expense be eligible to be covered by the community communication
Yeah, that did go through, the actual funding for that expense was through PEG funds.
PEG funds, yeah, okay.
Because it opens up, it just makes the government more accessible to residents.
Thank you.
And while we're on that, not to have a whole separate agenda item, but, you know, our website really is the first stop for a lot of people looking at our township, whether it's developers, potential residents, or current residents, and we need it to function for several different audiences. And so that's what the concentration has been on, is, you know, making sure that when somebody's looking at it, you know, as a potential place to live or a current resident, that it makes it easy to find what you're looking for. So I'm excited about the portal for resident issues, because right now, pretty much, you know, I'm getting texts, or our Facebook is getting questions posted on it, and really, you know, our police, the fire, you know, their Facebook pages are getting posted with questions, or people instant messaging them or whatever, and it'd be much better to have that, you know, in a process where it's logged, it's, you know, documented, and it goes to the appropriate department, if it's a building question, if it's fire, and have a central place to send people. So I think it's going to be an excellent tool that our residents will come to appreciate once it's up and running.
Can we advertise that or promote that on the next mailer we have with the water bills or tax bills or whatever we have, when the
We can,
functionality is up and going?
We should have it out, I think within the next 30 days is what our goal was, the end of September, to have it out. And then the other thing that is new with this, for all the board to understand, is that E-Plan review module that we purchased through OnBase to make our development-ready portal interactive. That's incorporated into this website redesign, so that will be a portion of it.
So developers can access it and go into the portal they need to. So it's very comprehensive. We actually had a meeting with the company that's doing it, and I sat in for part of it, and we looked at numerous other, I'll say proactive or progressive communities, and looked at their websites, and this will function just as good or better than theirs, and really the appeal, I think, will be there too. I haven't seen where it's at right now, but if it's anything like the ones we were looking at that this company did, it should be fabulous.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Lane?
Mr. Chair, in addition to approving the consent and the regular agenda, I needed to add an item under operations, and that is the consideration for pay for the election workers.
Okay, Ms. Lane would like to add something to the agenda, which is regarding an issue that she wants to discuss as far as increasing the pay. Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, if I'm wrong, please correct me. I thought that was a consensus agreement that we had, that nothing could be added to the agenda unless it was on the agenda. Is that correct?
Well, we kind of have said that unless it's an emergency, we don't make financial decisions unless it's something just, and I'm not sure if you're looking for a decision tonight on this, Ms. Lane, or discussion, or?
I would like at least a decision tonight if the board will approve the stipend for the extra work they did on August the 7th.
So you are looking for a decision then tonight?
Right. And this was the direction from Mr. Limita this afternoon.
Mr. Who?
Mr.
Well,
Limita, our supervisor.
Well, I think you said to bring it up. He didn't say one way or the other to put it on there, but you said you could bring it up tonight and see what the board says. But Mr. Mansour, you were the maker of the motion for
Did I?
approving the agenda, I think.
I don't think I was.
Oh, weren't you?
No, I asked for a question.
Okay,
I made the motion, and Mr.
Oh.
Massey supported it, Mr. Supervisor.
okay. So for the approval of the agenda?
And the consent agenda with this
Okay.
addition.
Okay, so Ms. Lane's asking, and sounds like Mr. Massey's not going along with the,
Well, it's not the idea of going along with it. If
it's
we-
our board
if-
policy
Yeah,
you're
if we
saying.
have a board policy and we keep breaking the policy,
You just got to ask for a second.
then what?
Though Ms. Lane made a motion to approve the
Both.
agenda as submitted, right? And
She
then-
needs to revise her agenda, her motion. I think proper thing is, if you guys are prepared, you should probably do these separately. Do the consent agenda, and then she can make a motion to add something to the agenda. If there's a second, you guys can
Okay.
consider that separately.
So let's move on the current motion to,
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Vendor number 5980, is that valid because it has named Kathy Lane? Is that valid?
What are you referring to?
A check?
The vendor number 5980 paid to Kathy Lane, is that the clerk here?
Yes. It's,
reimbursement or
What
something?
are we
That's-
talking about? We're talking about the consent agenda. Are we talking about
think-
the treasurer's report?
I think that's what Mr. Massey is referring to as the treasurer's report?
Yes.
The question within the treasurer's report?
Yes.
I don't know, do you see what 5980 is, Mr. Lemata? It's a
Yeah,
reimbursement?
it's just a reimbursement to Clerk Lane for an expenditure.
Oh, okay.
for the board's, for Mr. Massey's clarification, on Saturday before the election, when we were having to update the computers for the election, one of the computers didn't work, so Mr. Moran came in and we went to Staples and we had to buy another computer so that we had the additional computer we needed to run the 15 precincts. And so I used my personal credit card and gave them the bill from Staples.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second with regard to the agenda and the consent agenda.
I think you're gonna break them up into the consent first, right?
Okay?
Ready for a vote on the consent?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now we will have
Miss-
a motion with regard to, well, Ms. Lane, you want to make a
All
motion?
right, I'll make it a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of consideration of the election workers' pay.
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I thought that was a board policy that we didn't add to the agenda. Now, we're gonna break our own board policy, or how are we gonna come to some kind of an agreement?
It's a good question. Now, how does the
Mr.
board
Chair?
feel about that? That we have, you know, in fact, we even brought this up with regard to the fire commission meeting that, and told their commission that we have a policy, and it was, you know, questioned whether or not it was legal to do this, but it's not a law or anything, it's just our board policy practice that we don't put things on the agenda last minute that are, especially of a financial nature, unless it's an emergency. So, I don't know if the board wishes to continue with that policy, I guess is the question that Mr. Massey is putting forth. Ms. Lane?
Mr. Chairman, this came to my attention because Mr. Verney went ahead and finished making up the checks, and I was on vacation, and she signed them, and I didn't know until last week when the people started calling me and saying, Kathy, we were shorted in our paycheck, and I discussed it with several members of this board and Mr. Lemata and Mr. Massey. Last Thursday night, we had a meeting of the Election Commission where I mentioned that I wanted to bring it up and get it all straightened around so we didn't lose good election workers. And so,
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Thomas?
Before we start discussing the merits of what we wanted to
Right.
put on the agenda, let's get back to the original. I mean, we shouldn't even be discussing the things that that Clerk Lane wants to put on the agenda. We should be discussing the proposal of the agenda. And
Right.
I do not see an issue at all with adding something of a financial, not emergency, but something that should be looked at quickly. I don't have an issue with it.
If it's something that needs to be looked at quickly, you're saying?
Yes, a contract, something that needs to be done.
Okay. So the question for you is whether or not this is
I
of
mean, is it
urgent
urgent?
nature.
When is the proper time, may I ask a question through you to Attorney Laddie?
As far as what would be the proper time to,
When is the proper time for us to request something to go, the way that I've looked at it is if I want an agenda item, Attorney Laddie, if I want to add something to our agenda, I first have to go to Supervisor Bennett, get Supervisor Bennett's, to put it on the agenda, am I correct?
Well, in combination with Superintendent Leavitt, yes.
Okay. And if Supervisor Bennett, and that's part of his that's part of his job and his charge to decide if we can or if it's should become an agenda item or not, correct?
Correct.
Well, and that, it also, I mean, it has something to do with timing too. I mean, there's things that we'll put on the agenda, but the timing has to be right. Mr. Lemon?
This would have been on your agenda, it's just that it was received 1 hour after the packets had already gone out. It's the only reason it's not on your agenda. When Clerk Lane asked me about it, and said, it is somewhat of a rush nature because it involved some election workers' pay who stayed here long hours and felt that they didn't get enough, so she was hoping that the board would consider it. I think one of the concerns that she expressed is that she wants to make sure that she takes care of her election workers so that she doesn't have any leave because they felt that maybe they thought they were that the money was due or whatever, and if you otherwise won't be taking action until September 13th, so another 2 weeks are gonna go by before you'll take an action, and that was the reason she expressed to me, and I said, well, then just ask the board if you can include it with tonight's agenda, add it under operational issues as number 7B, and see if the board will consider it. So that's kind of what brought you to where you're at.
If you're looking for consent, I'm fine with
Yes, Mr. Massey?
May I make a comment here while we're on this topic? It seems like that we want to put on the agenda, and I have no gripes about it except one condition. Let's get an understanding now about the election, because we have an election coming up in November, okay? For the last time, may I ask Madam Clerk a question? And my question to you, Madam Clerk, how are you going to handle this going forward?
We had this discussion, Mr. Massey, Thursday night, and we discussed it, and I proposed.
Well, let's figure out whether or not we want to put it on the agenda, and then we'll have the discussion on the merits. But I understand what you're saying, Mr. Massey, and
Me too.
Would you go along with us putting it on the agenda so we can have that discussion as far as if this is going to take care of it? I understand that it sounds like it's a question as to whether or not this is urgent or not.
Well, no, that's really not my question. My
Okay.
question is being as blatant as I possibly can. Okay, we got an election coming up in November.
Right.
So if we're gonna pass this tonight, let's make sure we're not coming back in November.
Okay.
Well, let's put it on the agenda first, I'm sorry.
So,
Mr. Mansour?
let me just, my 2 cents here. So, I look at this as 2 issues here. One, we've got a 3-week-old issue with some election stipend that I think that we, as a board, kind of agreed that we were gonna pay our election workers. So for me, bringing that to the forefront now is a non-issue. I'd like to see it on the agenda. I'd like to get these people kind of paid what I think they should be paid and go from there. Now, the November piece of it and how we want to treat that might come at a later time, but let's get that
No,
before the
you
election.
probably don't understand what I'm saying about the November piece. November, we shouldn't have to come back to, the Madam Clerk shouldn't have to come back to the board.
I agree.
That's the part
I agree.
that we can clear up right now while we're on the topic. So whatever has to be paid out, the clerk knows how long they're gonna be here, the following day. You know how long they have been here the following day, right? If the election's on a Tuesday, that Wednesday, you know how many hours they have worked, right?
Right.
Okay, so at that time, you would have to put in the correct hours, right, for additional pay.
Motion to
We
put
are,
this on the agenda.
no,
Well, Kath, let's,
Let's vote on
where are
it.
we at with the motion?
Let's-
You had the
we
motion.
just had I made the motion, Mr. Guzak indicated
Second.
his support
This
to
is
put it
just
on
putting
the agenda.
Topic.
Then we'll start
Let's,
discussing.
okay, so Mr. Massey, it sounds like we're getting discussion of the item. Would you mind if we put it on the agenda and then we can flesh
Okay.
out whether or not it?
Put it on there.
Okay, so all in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, and we'll make this item number
7B.
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 Okay.
All right, thank you. With that, we're going to move to citizen comments, and we'll start here on the left side of the room. Okay, we'll go to the right side of the room. Good evening. Please give us your name and address, and
Sure. Thanks,
Welcome.
Mr. Bennett and the board. My name is Greg Curtis. I live at 5071 Harp Drive, Linden, Michigan. As you might notice, that's outside of Grand Blanc Township. I am the Democratic nominee for County Commissioner in District 6, which does include Grand Blanc Township precincts 5 and 15. And I'm just here tonight to introduce myself and let you see my face and learn a little bit about me. I grew up in the area. I went to Carmen Ainsworth High School, graduated in 2004. Went to the University of Oklahoma, where sure.
thank you, Mr. Laddie.
Oh, thank you. You want me to start over or just keep
Well, that way the people on.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So yes, my name is Greg Curtis. I live at 5071 Harp Drive, Linden, Michigan. Like I said, it's outside of your guys' jurisdiction, but I'm running for County Commissioner of District 6 of Genesee County, which includes Fenton, Linden, Argentine, a little bit of Mundy Township, and precincts 5 and 15 of Grand Blanc Township. I'm here to just introduce myself and let you see my face and kind of tell you a little bit about me. Like I said, I graduated from Carmen Ainsworth High School, class of '04. I went to the University of Oklahoma and studied music education. And I was a choir teacher for a couple years, and I came back and substituted here in the county. I ended up getting into bartending because teaching wasn't paying the bills, frankly. And I found that bartending was a much more efficient way to make some money, and I got to do some traveling with it. When I eventually settled back into Genesee County, I moved into Linden, and I fell in love with the area. It kind of reminded me of northern Michigan, the lakes, the small towns, the friendly people. I did do a stint living in Thornridge Apartments, which was in Grand Blanc Township, and I enjoyed it there as well. And really, as a young person, I felt like I'd been on the sidelines too long. Genesee County, Flint especially, but many areas of Genesee County, we're lacking a lot of young people that are taking initiative, taking ownership of the issues we're going to inherit as time moves on. And I feel like I haven't done enough, and I've been a little complacent sitting on the sidelines. I've done a little bit of talking, but really not enough walking, and I want to step up and be a good representative of this county and this community. And you know, I've found that since I decided to get into this, I got a call in last December. Someone said, hey, your commissioner, who's Drew Shapiro, he's not running again. It's going to be an open seat. And we know you're very interested in getting involved and doing something more. I was intimidated by the offer, thinking, you know, that seems like a huge step. When I decided to jump into it, I went in, dove both feet in, all the way in, and I wake up every morning very excited and very passionate about the events I have on my agenda each day. And I'm excited to be here talking to you, and I hope I get a chance to shake each of your hands and hear what's on your mind about what we can do to keep Genesee County moving forward. And I'll leave some cards over here, but hopefully after the meeting I can get to at least shake some of your hands. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you going to be here for the entire meeting?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Moving to the back of the room, Mr. Ert. Good evening.
Good evening. Eder, 7212 Porter Road. I hope I don't mess anything up here. I brought too many pieces of paper, I think.
We'll let you know.
Okay. Take my comments constructively, okay? I'm not trying to be negative or anything. I just bring things to light, all right? And I'm looking at on your agenda, you have some things for commission, and you take no action at it. But I'm wondering, as years go by, and these are in your packet, if that they're in your packet, you're kind of condoning them. I'd hate to see something come back to haunt you that someone 5 years from now says, we did this on the commission and you knew all about it. So I'm almost wondering if there should be a disclaimer on this because it could come back to haunt you.
You're talking with regard to the minutes from the various commissions? that we have
Yeah,
tonight.
because there are some things there that I don't think the board agrees with, but you see them now that commission thinks, well, the board knows about it and it's okay. You know, you've seen them, but you don't necessarily agree with them, a disclaimer. So, it's just a thought.
Okay.
And I do see on the minutes of those meetings for the commissions on June 21st, Parks and Recreation, that when you click on it, it says June 14th. So I don't know which is the right date or which isn't. But I do notice on Parks and Recs on June 14th what it says. It says that, Kay Etzen says, in regards to the senior center bus, that she spoke with the city manager and the city finance council and requested to borrow money from the millage fund at no interest. And repayment would be done under the senior millage money. We're borrowing money from a millage for Parks and Recs to the senior center and then paying it back with millage money from the senior center. It sure seems goofy to me. Okay, but that's what it says. I just wonder if this is actually legal. And it also doesn't say what the time frame is. You're a 3rd% of the senior center. You're a 3rd% of Parks and Rec, so you're involved in this. And what's the payment time frame coming back? Is this for 40 years, for 2 years? What are we paying every year at no interest? And wasn't that money for Parks and Recs, not the senior center, to be lent out? Just a big red flag that I see. You can do with that information what you wish. Also on that same June 14th meeting, Kay Etzen stated the city was working on an update for Physicians Park. Etzen noted they have applied for a grant, the city, and I assume it's the city, and are currently waiting to hear if their request was approved. Along with the grant, they will most likely approach Parks and Recreation Commission to request approximately $6,000 to help in facilitating it. I'm going to assume that money's from the city's Park and Recreation money, but it doesn't say here. So I don't know what you could possibly be condoning here. So, and I also thought that the Park and Recreation Commission wasn't involved in city parks. To me, it's a big flag. Uh-oh, that was a heavy page. Also, and I don't want to take your time too long. Director Etzen also said at one of your meetings, okay, the Township Board meeting of April 12th, that explains the camera equipment allows for the police department to view activities in Bicentennial Park on their phones and on their computer dispatch. I'm just wondering if this has been completed or it's happening, because it was said back in April, so it should be happening. Okay, I'll leave that one alone. I'll be brief here. Be brief.
Okay.
The last 4 months I've been walking the park, Bicentennial. I've been walking it 4 to 5 days a week. Okay, and I've noticed we put in that inline skating. Okay, put $100,000 into that thing, and I haven't seen an inline skater on it yet. And it was such a big thing with parks when they wanted the money. Take the tennis courts out and throw them inline skating. I do see hockey players on it though lately, getting ready for the bad weather. You know, they want to skate. They're out there doing their thing, and that's great. I love to see people in that park. But why not ice in the winter there? They're there already. Why don't we have an ice pad there for them?
Much more, Mr.
Pardon?
You have much more, or no?
No, I got one last thing after
Okay.
that. Pointing it out, we should have an ice skate rink there,
Well,
okay?
I think the city's looking at ice rink, aren't they, or?
Well, that's a conflict of interest. I mean, so,
Well, I
so
thought I
we
read
take it
something about
at,
that.
we train them in the fall, and then they go over there and do their thing. Why don't we do it right there? Because that's where the commission is sitting in their maintenance area. Last but not least, I've noticed the concrete in various areas have been placed on grade or above grade. It creates washouts. It's not the right way to have concrete done. And the fix for this is very simple. They just have to shore it up.
Bring the grade up to the
Let's take
concrete.
care of the concrete. So, sorry I took more of my time than I should have, but it is
Okay.
important.
Thank you, Mr. Erb.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Supervisor Bennett, can I respond to the
Um,
millage of the bus real
Let's,
quick?
you're gonna be able to respond under future positioning, okay, if you would?
All right.
Just make a note, and, because I'd like to get
Okay.
to our parks, I mean, our library director, Mr. Conklin. So, with that, I'd like to welcome Mr. Conklin, our director of the Genesee District Library, Mr. Delaney, who's the chair of the GDL as well.
Thank you.
So, welcome.
It's great to be here, and thank you for allowing us to come and make a presentation.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I did a similar presentation to the other founding board of the district library yesterday morning, the Board of Commissioners, Genesee County Board of Commissioners. So I'm happy to do this. It's something I started doing shortly after I started in May of 2013 as the library director. So some of these slides you'll recognize. Some of you board members who have been here before, you might recognize some of them. Some of them will be new. So I'll try to keep it moving for you so we can get through them. So. This one you might recognize, GDL. For those who don't know, we are the third largest library system in the state of Michigan by population. We have 19 different branches spread across the county. We do not include the city of Flint, although we do partner with them with a lot of different things. We partner with local municipalities, as you may know. The Grand Blanc McFarland Library branch of the Genesee District Library is supported by both this board and the city to bring that facility. We provide the services and the employees, and the local municipalities provide the buildings and the upkeep on those buildings. Services that you might not know about are our Talking Book Center. Our Talking Book Center is a great program that we partner with the state and with the federal government to bring to the residents of Genesee County. And what that is free material through the mail. If you qualify for the service by not being able to read standard print, you can get all this digital player free for yours to keep as long as you're in the service. You get digital books sent to you through the mail, and you return them free through the mail. Free to maybe you'll have seen that free matter for the blind kind of sticker. That's how that stuff works, and that's through federal funds. Versus our peers. Kent District Library, I mentioned we're the third largest, so your question might be who's the first largest. Detroit Public Library currently is the first largest library in the state of Michigan. Kent District Library over there in Kent County is the second largest library. And then you see Genesee District Library there, Capital Area District Library bringing the fourth. And I have Flint Public Library there, our peer by geographic location. Class 6 is the size library that we are. Any library in the state of Michigan that's serves over 50,000 people is considered a Class 6 library. We're considered a super library because we serve over 300,000 people. When you look at how we rank to our peers, you can see that our millage rate is significantly lower than our peers. You can see our per capita spending is significantly lower than even the average Class 6 libraries through the state of Michigan. But we're still getting the job done. We're doing more with less. And if you look at that picture there where you see A to B, when you got the squiggly line and you got a lot of funding, you can kind of put the frills on it and you go from A to B. But when you're like us and you're doing things lean and mean, we're going directly from A to B. Sure.
Mr. Conklin, does the Kent District and the capital area, do those include, Kent, I would assume, is the Grand Rapids area? Does that include the city of Grand Rapids, or does the capital area include
City of Grand Rapids has their own public, yeah. Capital Area District Library, there's a lot of little libraries that make that up.
Okay.
But there is a Lansing library as well.
Okay. So none of those include large metropolitan areas, then it's pretty much much similar to,
Very similar to Genesee District
Gotcha.
Library, yep.
okay.
Yep. And they do the same thing at Kent District Library, where they partner with the municipalities to bring those library services to their folks too. They used to have, they just added a branch, they used to have 18, we used to have more branches than anybody else, but now they have 19, just like us.
Our per capita spending's significantly less.
Significantly less even than the average. So even the smaller Class 6 libraries spend more per capita than we do here in Genesee County.
Do you, Director, do you have any information on Warren, Michigan?
Warren has their own public library. They are Class 6. What kind of information you're looking for? I did work in Macomb County at Shelby Township Library. I was a director there for 5 years
For size.
before coming here, but
For its size?
their size?
Yeah.
They are Class 6.
Class 6?
Yes, yep. Mhm. I think they, pretty big city,
Yes.
Yes.
yeah. Paying down our liabilities is something that we're looking to do as we go forward. This is a new slide for you who have not seen this from last year. This is payments that we've made over and above of our long-term liabilities. So these are steps that we are doing to be fiscally responsible. If you look in 2014, you can see the OPEB, which is other post-employee benefits. I'm sure you're all familiar with those costs and those long-term liabilities that all the municipalities in Michigan and across the United States are looking at, and looking at ways to make sure we can meet those obligations. Our defined benefit retirement system is closed. That was closed in 2013, so we don't have people being added to it. We have defined contribution for anybody hired after January 1st, 2013. But we're paying over and above, so we're not meeting the minimum, we're paying above to make sure that we have those funds available in the future when they need to be there. This one might look familiar to you. The ROI is different. It's updated for 2017, but I'll talk about ROI, and my version of ROI is basic. It's just basic math. It's if our residents went out and paid for the services that they're getting for us, it would have cost them $43 million, $127,320. Instead, the library operating budget was $9.1 million. Now, that operating budget is a little bit higher because we're paying down our liability. I like our ROI to be closer 1 to 5. For every $1 spent on the library, you get $5 back in services. We're at about $4.73 last year, and that's because it hits our budget when we pay money down on those liabilities. So that's why it looks like it's taking a bit of a hit. Now, I've got a photo up there, and I've explained it to you, some of you before, but for those of you who haven't noticed that gentleman up there is Albert Einstein, and he appears to be standing in front of a chalkboard, and he's written out, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. Why is that significant when I'm talking about ROI? Because I'm talking about ROI, and that's basic math. I'm not talking about, some libraries might put in, well, we inspired these many kids to read, or we helped this many people get a job because they couldn't put an application in any other way except for coming into the library, or this person learned this skill, or this person honed their resume. We're not capturing those things because those are a bit intangible to capture, but we still are making a difference. So those things really can't be counted, but they still count. So that's why I have that up there. And also I have that up there for another meaning, and that is that Albert Einstein really didn't stand in front of that chalkboard, and he never wrote those words. Those words were actually written by sociologist William Bruce Cameron there in 1963. So by the miracle of the internet, people pull that up and they look at that and they say, I'm not sure what's happening here, but they say, look what Albert Einstein, isn't this a wise, this is a much attributable quote to Albert Einstein, even though he never said that. That's another value add that libraries have to the community. They can help our residents go through, look at what web pages are good, what web pages are not good. And used to be, it was because of misinformation that was out there. There was a lot of misinformation. But now anymore, we're seeing a lot of disinformation. We're seeing a lot of purposely perpetuated information that is not true at all being out there. And libraries can help our residents sort through those things. 1 foot in the past and 1 foot in the future. We're still there. That's where we're at. On the left side, you can see that's the past. Warehouse of books, quiet study areas, story times, reader's advisory. We've got our residents coming in that expect that kind of service from us. Yet on the other hand, we've got residents coming in, they want to see our webpage. They want to use our webpage to access us, like you were talking earlier today. We have databases that we want to use. We have a business center. We've got all kinds of progressive programming, 3D printing, yoga, Myers-Briggs, learning about what your strengths and weaknesses are through Myers-Briggs. We also have ebooks, e-magazines, e-audio, and e-music. Meeting spaces are a big thing. As we see digital, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later on, digital go up and physical items go down, you think, well, you're going to have a lot of space in libraries, right? Well, that's being used up by meeting room spaces. We've got Cub Scout people coming in and they want to meet. They want someplace to meet. We've got all kinds of different social groups and things like that are looking for spaces where they can come in the community and get together, and libraries are providing that for them. The McFarland branch does that very well. And computers and Wi-Fi, of course, you all know about. So we are today's modern library. And those things, it says free, free, free up there. We all know that our taxpayers pay for that, right? It's not actually free. The money, it does come from somewhere. It comes from our taxpayers. But you don't have to reach into your pocket and pay for this every time you come in. And we know the value add is, if they were paying for that every time they came in on their own, it would be $43 million instead of the $9 million. So we're looking ahead strategically. This is straight out of our strategic plan, which is on our website. We're looking to create young readers. We're looking to support lifelong learning. We're looking to cultivate cultural enrichment and connect residents to community resources. There are a lot of resources out there people don't know about. Come into the library, we can help you find them and put you together with those resources. And of course, practicing fiscal responsibility. All those things are in there. If you want to read more about those, hop on our website, get to our strategic plan, and you can read the details about how we're doing all of that. This is the circulation trend I referred to just a minute ago. You can see that top line, that's a descending line, that's physical items in circulation since 2013. And you can see there's a downward trend, right? On the bottom, you can see the digital items. There's a reverse trend there. We've got digital items continuing to grow, physical items continuing to go down. And that has to do with digital, as digital literacy becomes more and more prevalent, as our residents become more and more accustomed to doing things digitally, that's going to continue to go. And at one point, they're going to intersect, and they're going to continue to go. Are physical items going to go away completely in a library? I'm not so sure that's going to happen in my lifetime. Are they going to continue to decrease? Absolutely. But, you know, we're talking about millions of items, and if they decrease, you know, by 3% each year, 5% each year, it's going to take a long time before that goes to nothing. So I do look for 2019 or to really see a big bump in our digital items, and that's because of a new vendor that we're looking at and a new way of bringing those to our folks. So that will kind of bump that up a little bit closer to those, where those might intersect. In July of 2018, Forbes, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, had an op-ed, which is an opinion editorial piece, put on by this Panis, and I can't pronounce the guy's name, but he apparently is an economist at Rhode Island University. Put up an op-ed piece talking about how libraries, that local communities like yourself should just put up little Amazon stores, physical stores in all of your communities instead of having libraries, saying, oh, that's going to save you a bunch of money. The interesting thing about that is that he was met with such backlash with all these people saying libraries are great because of this, libraries are great because of that. This is why that doesn't make sense, that Forbes took that down the same day. And I find that interesting because 8 years ago, 10 years ago, everybody was talking about how the internet's going to replace libraries, right? We're not going to need libraries because we've got the internet. You have all this access at your fingertips. And the interesting thing to me is that the people who were responding to this online Forbes piece was the internet. It was internet users. There were people who were tweeting about it. There were people who were sending emails about it. There were people who were doing all these things. So it was basically the internet standing up for libraries saying, you know what, this isn't right. The local public library is a valuable piece, and we all think it. Even though we are in a digital world, we see the importance of the library. So I thought that was fairly significant, and I wanted to share that with you today. I would give you the site for that article, but it's been pulled off and gone and destroyed. There's been speculation that the guy might have done it to get clicks. I don't know if you've heard of clickbait in the digital world, that this guy might be getting paid, so the more outlandish things he writes, the more clicks he gets, the more he gets paid. And that's unfortunate in the digital community. If you think about publishing, the way it used to be, to get published, you had to do something of some significance. The publishers had to invest a lot of money to print those things, so it really had to be vetted out. Now anybody can publish themselves on the internet and make that information out there. Another reason why libraries are important in today's society. And that's it. That's what I've got. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I'm happy to answer any questions. And if you don't have any, I'll see you next year.
Mr. Conklin, I know one of the jewels of the Grand Blanc Barry McFarland Library is the business center that you have there. So for the advantage of the viewers that are watching, would you tell them a little bit about that? Because if they don't go to the library, they don't know it's there.
Yeah, if they haven't been in the library in Grand Blanc one, especially recently, they're in for a big shock when they go in there because it's been beautifully renovated. There's some great stuff going on there, early literacy stuff. But to get to the Bolo Business Center, that is the only one in Genesee County. It's the only one in the area, and they will help you set up a new business. They will put you in touch with a database called Demographics Now. When you're setting up a new business, you're going to want to see how many other businesses are out there like this in this area. You want to do a lot of research. They also might be able to put you in touch with somebody in a SCORE program. SCORE is a program where you have retired business folks who are interested in helping new and upcoming people who want to start businesses, and they might be able to put you in touch with those things too. But Elger Newberry is our business librarian there. He's there 40 hours a week, and if you can run into him, if you can't, call him, make an appointment with him. He can help you do those things. He can also help you with things like resumes and things like that too.
Thank you.
Mr. Mansour?
Do you have, indulge me, I have a couple questions here.
Sure.
So, one foot in the past, 1 foot in the future, and looking ahead strategically. Those particular areas, how do you determine what is of value and what, how you focus on these particular areas?
For our strategic plan you're talking about?
You mentioned, look, there you go, it's up there,
Yep.
exactly right.
Yeah, this is our strategic plan, and we're in 2016 through 2017, 2018, 2019, 3 years. We do 3 years because we don't want to do 5 years because we want to we want to make sure that it means something, that we look at it and it's an active document. We want to do it in 5 years, forget about it, and say, oh, 5 years, we gotta do another one. So we have SMART goals that we have in the document, and you can find that online. And it talks about exactly what measures we're going to meet, what timeline we're going to meet those measures, and things like that. This wasn't something I just came up with out of the just decided on. We had a team, a strategic planning team. We did surveys of our patrons. We did surveys of our staff. We did surveys of leadership, and we took all of that information in, and we crafted the document and where we want to be, knowing about library trends and that too.
So, second question here, in terms of the circulation trend, obviously downward from the physical standpoint, what is being maintained, or how do you make a decision on what kind of goes out and what you maintain?
We have a collection development policy, and we have a list of policies on our website that you're welcome to look at too. And we just redid those, I think, in 2016. We completely revamped our policy manual. But we have policies in there, and our librarians at each branch will be in charge of their collection. They have support from our technical services librarian, our technical services team. We have a centralized kind of purchasing where things come in and then they're sent out to the branches. So we have tools like what's circulated, what hasn't circulated, what's been requested. We have a way for people to request items if they might want them. Of course, bestseller lists make a difference. But we have trained professionals, these librarians. They went to school. They know exactly. They try to stay in touch with their community. So a book that might be popular in Grand Blanc might not be real popular, say, in Clio. So there might be a little bit differences in those collections. So, but basically space drives it too. Space, funding are big drivers. If it's popular and we get so many holds, you can put a hold on a book. If you have like 20 holds on a book, and we want to purchase a few more of those, so those will go out. But we don't want to purchase too many because we don't want to wear out our welcome and have that go out once and then it's on the shelf and it's considered dead wood for a long time.
And last question is we have a couple of people that sit on your board that represent us. Are they giving you valuable input?
You're talking about my bosses? They're fabulous. I got one sitting right here. This guy's great. I couldn't do anything without him. But yeah, they're all really good people. They, we have meetings and they help guide the library in the direction that we're going.
I was trying to find a different way to
So,
say
yeah.
that, but I just, it didn't work out well. Anyway,
They're all fantastic.
thank you.
Wondering about Mr. Mansur brought up, the retention, what it is that, that you keep, what have you, but does and I know we have the business center here in Grand Blanc, and I'm not sure what your other branches have, but are the collections drastically different based on where they're at in the county, or do they pretty much mimic each other, or?
I wouldn't say drastically different, but they are different. They take on the personality of that community and whoever that librarian is. As much as we like to say as librarians, we are without bias, everybody has a certain amount of bias. We're gonna have some people, and we're gonna look for those strengths. We have people who are crazy about graphic novels. We're gonna say, okay, you know all about graphic novels, we're gonna put you in charge of graphic novels. We got somebody who loves romance novels, that kind of a thing, they're gonna be in charge of romance novels. So we're gonna kind of work to our strengths, develop our weaknesses.
In terms of number of visits to the library, I'm sure you track
Yep.
that number.
We do.
Where does Grand Blanc stack up in terms of looking at, the branches that you have, and, I don't know if you look at that per capita, or how you look at that?
Not per capita, we have a number, and they are by far our busiest branch. It's the
McFarland
biggest
is.
collection that we have there. They've got great reading room spaces. It's a wonderful building. I think it might be the only building, well, there's probably two, one in Montrose, that were actually designed and built as libraries, so makes a bit of a difference, but, is that your question as compared to each other?
Right.
Which one's which?
I just
And
wondered
that's
as far as
all
how
in
to
the
stack
annual
up.
report too.
Okay.
I think we've got circulation numbers
Okay,
in there,
I'll
so.
take a look at that.
Yep.
And then, is the funding, in terms of, where the funding comes from for the GDL, in terms of, I imagine you get some grants along the way, and
Oh,
some other
absolutely.
sources?
You can,
I could ask one of your
every
board
monthly board
members.
report that I do, we have
Yes,
an
I know.
ongoing list of the grants that we've
Okay.
gotten. Just recently, we've gotten 5 different grants for different programs that we've done are worth $10,000. There's usually, we'll get grant funding anywhere between 5 all the way up to $60,000, depending on the year and what's available, and if we're accepted, because we're competing with other libraries.
And also, just hats off to you for your efforts on the OPEB and the unfunded liabilities on focusing on those, because I know that as a board here, we look at some staggering numbers, and I know, our concern is for those entities that we're involved with, whether we're partners or any of these things we're partners with, what those numbers look like, and it's very gratifying to know that we have a director that is focused on that, and a board that is working on, making sure that our future is secure by paying those down as much as possible and closing off programs that are causing us to maybe go down the wrong path.
Right, well,
So-
thank you. It's a team effort. I've got a great administration team. My finance manager, Amy Golden, is a big proponent of that too. We see eye to eye in those things, and she comes up with those numbers and does a great job, so.
One last point is, if any of you get the opportunity, I know the Black History Month dinner that you do every year is just, I'm always amazed at the professionalism that goes into that event. It's everything from the program book to the entertainment that you bring in is just top notch for this community. It's really a phenomenal event that you guys put on.
It's our biggest event that we do all year long, and it's something special.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you for
Conklin.
having me.
Thank you, David.
Working, okay. Okay, moving on to future positioning. We have a number of subcommittee reports, and I know that we had probably, 3 or 4 hour meeting, Mr. Thomas, with regard to our strategic planning on parks and Recreation this past week, and I know you had a question with that. I didn't want to cut you short, but I just wanted to make sure, probably a few other discussion points regarding Parks and Rec that we want to bring up as well.
Just real quick, the Parks and Rec subcommittees will be working on a steering committee, for lack of a better term, with Trustee Atkins, and we'll be meeting next Friday with Director Kay Edson for.
Can you push that microphone toward this one here?
I'm sorry.
I just want the
For
public to be able to hear what you're doing.
next Friday, we formed a small task steering committee with Trustee Atkins and myself and Director Edson. We're going to be meeting from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. on next Friday. So that's going to be a mapping session, and we'll bring that to the full board's privy the next meeting. So, and before we get into the nuts and bolts of the situations, we'll get that done before we bring this.
So value stream mapping, which I'm not real familiar with, but I understand it's going to look at the value of what we provide and all our assets.
Trustee Atkins sent me over a packet and a video on how he presents this. He does this for a living, and it's just absolutely fascinating. What it'll do is it'll basically give us a snapshot, just a quick picture of the day in the life of the park. And we're very excited to be working with Director Edson on this.
Okay.
Then we'll bring that to.
Mr. Erg had a concern with regard to the financing of the van, and it sounded like you had some information on that.
Some of the things about the van with the senior center, it's going to be paid back from the senior center millage, but I think Mr. Lehman, I had conversations with Director Edson about this because I brought it to Superintendent Lehman's attention a few months back.
Sure. As everyone's aware, the city collected a millage for Parks and Recreation, and I believe they have somewhere around $600,000. It's just sitting in the account. It had the caveat that because the millage went to both the city and the township, only the city passed it, not the township at that time, that they would keep that money in account to be spent within city limits or city operations. Much like the township's doing with the millage that we ultimately passed for capital improvements. The city offered to loan them the money to replace a very aging van that was going to cost quite a bit of money in maintenance at absolutely zero interest, and pay it back over the long haul rather than go out and do financing and paying interest on it. It's a fantastic deal for, obviously, for Parks and Recreation, as the senior center is run through Parks and Recreation. Fantastic deal where no interest, and it's that $600,000 that's otherwise sitting in an account, not really doing anything. So I think it was an excellent solution, and I applaud Director Edson as well as the city for coming together on those terms, and we've got a great value now with a van that is going to be ready to transport some more of our seniors to be able to, they can stay active within the senior program.
Any issues with legality on using one millage to pay for the van and then paying it back with a different?
No, as long as it's accounted for and paid back according to whatever terms.
Okay.
The other question that Mr. Ert presented was about the police and our camera, our security system out at Bicentennial Park. And at this time, the police, and it's never been set up where the police can plug into the cameras out there. I know that they've been looking at it, and Chief, do you have an update on where we're at with that?
I don't. My understanding was that capability was going to be there. However, no one's contacted our department to ready to take that next step, so I'm not sure where that's at.
And it was brought up when we met with Director Edson out at Bicentennial Park at our last board retreat, and as of right now, we do not have the capabilities. Our police department can't go on to real time. They can look at it at ours, but I know that it's a situation that we're looking at. Do you have anything to add on that, Superintendent Lemina?
The only thing I heard, Trustee Thomas, was from Director Edson when we were out there, and she said they do have the capability. They have static IP addresses, so really it's just a matter of making sure that we have the space and capability on video monitoring systems over in the department, And then there are static IP addresses that you can pull off those cameras at any time. So I think that that's really a possibility that could be done at any time. It's just a matter of getting you together with Parks and Recreation.
Yeah, Mr. Guzak mentioned it's basically an internet connection, right, that you'd make to log in. Yeah.
Those static IP addresses, once you have it, it goes to that camera, you can pull it up. We had that capability in my previous municipality, and I could pull it up on my phone and pull up any camera that we had in the entire municipality and take a look at what was going on inside the building, outside the building, fire, DPW, whatever. And it's the same thing here. It's just a static IP address. Once you punch in that, 192 dot whatever
Right.
number code, it's going to pull it up.
I think that's important that we take advantage of that, I mean, that feature, that we get whatever it is we need over to the police department to be able to look at that. If somebody called and said there's an issue, rather than having to race over there, I mean, en route, somebody else can be looking to see what's going on there on the camera. I'm sorry, Chief?
It's a great thing. We would be totally on board with it, and great value to our officers responding to any call. They're safe to have that information before they get there.
Especially with, the vastness of the park. It's like 200 acres. I
So
mean,
being an operational issue, Superintendent Lehman will take it from here and
yes,
then report back to us.
right.
And that's it. I'm looking forward to Trustee Atkins and myself reporting back to you.
Okay. Yeah, just to recap for public and our audience is that, what day was it last week? Thursday. We had a facilitator, Susan Radwan, meet with our board, and we looked at some roles and responsibilities of our board, but then we also looked at how we go about putting together strategic plans for our various entities, our partnerships, what have you. We focused around, or used as an example, our Parks and Recreation, and we, while all of us feel passionate about what we're doing here in the township, sometimes translating that passion into a clear course is difficult. And so I think through that meeting we came up with an action plan of how we want to go about putting together our strategic plans. And one of the first things we're doing is doing a lot of fact finding. And Mr. Thomas mentioned that one of our board members, Mr. Adkins, who had a conflict this evening, but had volunteered to do some value stream mapping with, once we have all that data, all those data points, and putting them together in some kind of semblance that we can look at and make some judgments and some value decisions, we'll take it to the next step. But our goal is to have this completed by, I think, we said the end of the year. Is that, am I right, Mr. Lehman?
Yes.
So it's something that we're not kicking down the road. It's something that we're going to be actively pursuing, and we hope that this pattern will work with other areas that we want to look at, partnerships, what have you. Anything else on Parks and Rec that we wanted to cover that for future positioning? Streets and roads, just a brief, Mr. Limita?
As we were going to discuss streets and roads, I just want the subcommittee as well as the rest of the board to know that we received some information from the Genesee County Road Commission. Typically we're about $60,000 on the 50/50 funds for the year. We'd heard that they were going to increase those. Informally, we were told that it was going to be $186,000 for 2019. A significant increase, which would mean I would need to find an additional $120,000 to get into 2019's budget. I don't know that we're going to get that confirmation before I have to push it out to you guys on Friday, but that may mean that if we want to take advantage of that full 50/50 funds, we're going to have to find a way to dedicate potentially an additional $120,000 to our 50/50 funds, but it would allow us to complete, obviously, many more road projects within the township, and you hate turning away the 50/50 money. If we put in, $186,000 a year, they'll put in $186,000 on a match, so we can accomplish a lot more projects than the $120,000 that we're currently spending combined.
Yeah, that's a good problem to have, I think. One of the, we have a number of subdivisions in our township that are either looking at the rebuilding of their subdivision streets. They're in various phases, whether it's waiting for an estimate from the county road commission, or they have an estimate and they're considering how they want to go about gathering public support in their subdivision for the repaving. We asked that they get like 55%, I believe, of those residents in that neighborhood to sign on. But I don't know, should we bring up just kind of the water
Yes.
philosophical question that people can be thinking about, Mr. Lehman?
You can, in a meeting earlier this week with representatives from the homeowners group from Warwick Hills, we also had this conversation a bit at the board level during the Village Green conversations about road repairs. But we've right now the board's policy is that if you want to bring water lines into a subdivision or development, it's up to the homeowners to do so and foot that cost. We have kicked around the idea that when somebody does a major road reconstruction project that's designed to last for 20 years, that the township board may want to consider participating by putting water mains in during that reconstruction project. The roads are already tore up, and if we're going to end up doing it, would be a good time to do it. Of course, that would require a commitment on the board's part for, depending on a subdivision, and we don't often have complete road reconstructions, so they come up periodically, but there's a potential that Village Green could be one. There's a potential that Warwick Hills could be one. Village Green, I believe, is estimated at $1.8 million, something like that, to put all the water mains in, taps and everything. We get $2,600 back on water when we put it back in. They also have to buy a meter and that, and then they run it to their house. It doesn't mean that you'll recoup your costs entirely, but that is their buy-in into the system that exists. It also then they become a customer for life, and then they pay the ready-to-serve charge on a monthly basis, and as well as use charges. So there is some logic to doing it, knowing that as we become less rural and more urbanized, it's inevitable that municipal water will be provided to the subdivisions in the community. So it's worth board's consideration. It's a philosophical shift on whether you want to do it, but it also sweetens the pot somewhat for folks who are going to have to expend $15,000 or $1,000 to resurface their road, knowing that also the potential is that we're going to run water main through there, and yes, it would be an additional requirement or additional hookup fee to hook in, but I've seen a lot of municipalities do it different ways, discount it at the time we're doing it, or discount the tap fee at the time we're doing it. You can make the requirement that nobody has to hook up when you put the water mains in, but if the property changes ownership, then they're required to then hook up to municipal water. I mean, there's a lot of ways you could just have it available and ready for in the future when somebody wanted it, but I think it's an inevitable as we continue to grow that will be spread out. Maybe the time to do it in there at the least cost is when the roads are being completely reconstructed, but that would be a great topic for the subcommittee to review and report back to the full board on the feasibility of moving forward with something like that.
It's probably not something that people see very often, but there are communities that kind of die out because of lack of good infrastructure, and not that we're in danger of having that happen, but we're looking at something that we're going to, if the residents decide to pave those streets, it's a 20-year, it'll be 20 years from now before this question comes before us again, or before this group. And I guess what we're looking at is, building our infrastructure. Like you say, it may not come back to us immediately, but the other thing that is happening in conjunction, water is a huge issue, not just here in Genesee County, but nationally and obviously throughout our state. But the DEQ has come out with some things recently that basically we're going more and more towards having to ensure that people have safe water, all the way to the point of maybe even inspecting homes to make sure they don't have lead anywhere in their system, which is debatable whether or not that's a municipality's responsibility, is to go onto somebody's property and to make sure that happens. But the issue becomes, you know, a public health issue maybe at some point as to the water supply that people have. And I would hate to, you know, I don't know if this is even possible. I haven't even discussed this with our legal counsel, but who knows 10 years from now what the federal government or state may require a municipality to provide to residents. But that infrastructure isn't easily put in the ground when after these roads are paved. So it's something that I think as a board we need to seriously consider moving forward. Ms. Lane?
I am supporting wholeheartedly Mr. Lemata's suggestion. He brought it up initially when Village Green came in, and the individual property owners were going to have to pay $21,000 for their roads. And I know I wouldn't want to have a road messed up for very long and then have it contractors come back to mess it up for water. But I know it could have been a tipping point where Village Green homeowners could have maybe made their 55% if we had had that decision sooner rather than later. And I know when we had our subcommittee meeting, the two representatives from Warwick were very favorable to discussing it further.
Yeah. I think it benefits the township to have those streets paved too.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've all driven through neighborhoods where the streets are crumbling. I'm not sure, I don't think it does anything for the value of the rest of the township to have neighborhoods where the streets are crumbling. So I'm in favor of doing what we can to retain property values regardless of where it is in the township. Any other thoughts on that issue? Moving on to, I think one of the things that we've met briefly, Mr. Mansour and I, as well as our planning director and Mr. Lima, to talk about some future positioning with regard to zoning and planning, and we'll be seeing some action on that later this year with regard to our master plan. We do have a vacancy that probably all of you were notified of by email, I believe, and I've already started working on appointment for that. And one of the things that we try to do on these boards is make sure that you know, we're well-rounded in terms of appointments to those. So you know, whether it's making sure that we have somebody that's in the real estate business, somebody that's in development, somebody that's in commercial development. And so talking to Mr. Mansour, Mr. Limita, and Mr. Lloyd, our planning building director, we actually, I've got a few phone calls out right now to some people that I think would be excellent additions to that and help us to round out that planning commission. Anything else on any of these other task force or subcommittees? Otherwise, we will move on to...
Supervisor Bennett?
Yes.
Just the one thing is that, just a reminder on the Tech Village, that the DDA did go through. We discussed it, that we had, no one had contacted the clerk's office with their resolution to opt out, so it's great news. We've got it, you know, the DDA has gone through. Attorney Laddie will be putting information together for you guys to look at into September. You got to do about 30-day notice, David, and then you will be ready to adopt that district and start naming a board and forming that. So you will have that on your plates in the next 30 days or so. I just want to make sure that we keep that up on the top of the shelf so that you know that keep thinking about who you want on that DDA board. Be prepared to form it. Unfortunately, Director Conklin's gone from the GDL, but they get to automatically opt out from any TIF captures as a library, but there's also the ability to request, if they're interested, to form a business agreement with the township and the GDL, and we could actually request that TIF capture stays with us for a period of time if we felt that it was important enough to capture that growth as well. So a couple things on your plate, just want you to be aware of it, and you know, this is such a huge deal for us, and what a financial incentive we're going to have the opportunity to offer to spur that development down on the south end of the township.
Mr. Laddie?
Well, just that Mr. Lehman is exactly right. You'll be seeing that probably shortly after Labor Day. I'll get you that information to start for your consideration. I already have a draft of the ordinance, but one of the things I'll do also is I will draft a proposed agreement for the GDL to give them the opportunity to consider, well, I guess opting in might be a good way to put it, where they can actually affirmatively say, we want you to utilize the taxes from the library millage in your efforts to grow that area. So watch for that in your email. I'll try to make it not really boring, but topic's a little dry. So.
Well, maybe we can put together a meeting with Mr. Conklin and their chair to talk about the possibility of putting together some type of business agreement.
Well, I think that's a good idea. I'll share with you what a draft would look like. And
Okay.
It's not intended to be anything that we would
Right.
introduce to them.
Okay, moving on to item B, of future positioning with regard to election worker pay. Ms.
That
Lang?
was going to be under operational, Mr. Chair, so we have a
Okay,
resolution
I'm sorry.
first.
I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong item.
That's all
I
right.
apologize.
No problem.
Under operational issues, first item A, the board will consider adopting a resolution for approval of the application of waiver of unfunded status regarding retiree health care.
I'd like to make that motion.
Support.
Mr. Limata, any discussion?
So just for your information, you guys have this very large packet set in front of you. Not that you're gonna need to go through and consider all that, it's really just documentation of past actions that the board has taken. We knew that with the passing of Public Act 202, that we knew where we were funded at on our OPEB. We met the threshold that we don't have to file a waiver request or a corrective action plan for our defined benefit pension for the police department, but we didn't meet the threshold for the retiree health care. So in order to comply with Public Act 202, once I got notice of underfunded status, I had to create a waiver request and ask them to consider extenuating circumstances that are in place now that our last actuarial evaluation on OPEB was December 31st of 2014. Of course, it looked considerably worse than the one from 2011, but it's because when I got here, I had them change the assumptions, which were incorrect. And so we have a valuation that is true to form. It was, $35 million of liability, 31 million is unfunded. But it was good to know and make some fact-based, data-driven decisions, because if you look at the actions we've taken, and I documented them in that application, one of the things about the Public Act 202 requires that the township board take an action. So Mr. Laddie has provided the resolution that says that you support my application for waiver status, and I have to sign off as a chief administrative officer that all the information I'm providing is accurate and true. All the supporting documentation is what's left in the remainder of that packet, and just so that you guys have a copy of it and you can see. But in a nutshell, there's three things that you have to address in here. The first is system design changes, and I just want to point out that all of our collective bargaining agreements that we entered into effective January 1st, 2017 with the police units addressed our OPEB as well as the AFSCME Chapter W and V contracts. All of those address retiree contributions to health care that they pay in retirement. So anyone retiring after the effective dates of those contracts actually has a monthly payment. The retiree health care defined benefit plan was...
Excuse me. So we've pretty much read this in the board package. It was distributed ahead of time. So can we waive the further reading of this and move to adopt? To,
Absolutely.
one of
If
the
you guys are
resolution?
good with what you have in your packet, then
I'm satisfied with the packet and we clearly have made steps towards addressing this issue, and I think, as the actuarial comes back, it'll show further evidence of it. Unfortunately, they required this prior to the actuarial work coming back, so we'll file it
Call for the resolution.
and then we'll give them the information with the actuarial when that comes.
and just so
up.
you know, what happens is I have to submit this no later than September 8th. They have the opportunity to take a look at it and reject it or accept it. If they reject it, it means we have to file a corrective action plan, and we have time to do that. That's what you guys are approving, and that's clear in the resolution, so that's the important part.
So it's a resolution, so it'll be a roll call vote, right?
Yes, Mr. Supervisor.
September the 8th, you said?
So you made the
I
motion?
submit it by September 8th.
Someone else seconded it.
Mr. Thomas made the motion and I supported it, Mr.
Okay.
Supervisor.
All right.
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mr. Supervisor?
Yes.
The motion was approved.
Okay. Okay, operational issue, item B, and
May I just
that's,
have one more thing?
Oh,
Is there a way, related to this waiver of unfunded status, I'd like us to consider putting some kind of a gauge somewhere on our new website that can kind of show the progress that we're making on this thing, because I'd like our residents to know that, first of all, we know it's important, and second, that we're taking action on it. So I don't know exactly what it would look like, but if we could have that out there somehow, it'd be very, I think I would like to see that. Thank you.
okay. Sure. Some kind of gauge that shows on
Yeah,
unfunded liabilities, how we're making progress on it.
Exactly.
Because we did pay down, what, close to, how much was it last 2 years?
Millions. Well,
Over $1 million
millions.
each year, the last 2 years, and then our investment policy change that the board supported. We had $5 million in there at the end of the old actuarial valuation. We've increased that by $4 million in the last 2 years.
So that's significant.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Thomas, are you going on to the next item?
Yes, Mr.
Okay, so
Supervisor.
election worker pay is where we're at now.
Trustees, Mr. Supervisor, I'd like to make a motion to the board to adopt a proposed flat rate of a stipend for the election workers and co-chairpersons effective with the November 2018 general election for $200 for the election worker and $250 for the co-chair and the chairmans.
I don't understand you. What date did you say? Which date did you say?
For the
Starting in the
November
November 2018.
I'll second
Starting with the November, does that cover
No,
August?
that's a different motion.
Okay.
That one Joe's supposed to make.
Okay, so there's a motion with regard to the November election to accept what Ms. Lane has asked.
Yes.
Okay, and it's been seconded. Mr. Massey,
November election.
the one coming up, yep.
The
For
big
now.
one.
Thought we was taking care of.
Well, Mr. Thomas made a motion
So,
for
discussion?
November 1st.
We're gonna look at the other one too, right?
Well, yeah.
Maybe,
There's
but discussion on this one?
motions.
Right.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Well, discussion,
Okay.
yes. My thought is, let's complete the one that's needed
The
immediate
one with the
attention.
August election.
Yes,
Okay.
let's complete the August election first.
All right, then,
Mr.
then
Mansour?
2 points. First, that is not on the, there's no motion made on that. Second, do we, as read, it did not include the after-hours stipend for the election workers and co-chair. I just wanted to make sure that,
It'd be two different motions.
no,
We could do it all at
no, in this, in the proposal to retain experience, et cetera, it mentions the $200 for election, $250, but then there's this other after 11 p.m.
I see what you're saying, but.
So just add that to it.
So do you want that or not?
Because there's a lot on this paper,
Right,
so
right.
let's
Okay,
look at,
so it would be,
you're looking at where it says proposed, the 17 precincts.
Yes.
Or I guess there's several of those too. So right
Who's-
here, Mr. Massey, just so
So
we're
just
all
add that to
looking at
your
the same
motion.
thing.
I don't
Yes.
remember us discussing this part in there.
The after hours.
I remember, oh, yeah. I remember, we were going to give them a 25-50. First off, let's do it this way then. I'd like to withdraw my motion. And who seconded the motion?
I did.
Mr. Guzzo.
Could you take that off? And
Why
I'm
you
gonna
take-
make, I'm gonna start the first one with the 25-50 for the last.
Okay, Mr. Guzak agrees.
I would like to make a motion that we pay a special stipend for August 17th, August 7th election one time to $25 for the 47 workers and $50 for the co-chairs.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and supported. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Mr. Thomas?
I'm not making that motion.
Okay. It sounds like there's some confusion on what's being asked for. And
I need some
so
clarification.
we're looking at this proposal right here, right, Ms. Lane?
Yes.
So we're looking at 17 precinct election workers at $200. Their co-chairs at $250. And then an after-hour stipend for election workers of $25. So that would be after they work past 11 for co-chairs and after 10 for
Right.
election workers. So
Yes.
$25 extra for election workers, $50 for co-chairs.
And as a comparison, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, if I may.
No, go right ahead.
With this one ballot on May 8th, we were able to get all of the work done because we were able to consolidate the elections. And even though everybody had their results at 9 o'clock unofficially, the precinct co-chair have to come back in here and go through all the paperwork with our staff, which has to be taken down to the county. We completed that for that simple election by 11 o'clock. It was 2 o'clock when we had the 34 chair people come back in here and go through with our 2 review boards all of the information so that it was correct to take down to the Board of Canvassers, and we didn't leave here until 2 o'clock. You had your results at 9:45, but there's paperwork that has to be done in the precincts, and then it has to come back here when they get everything packed up and go through, and has to be double-checked, and then it's taken to the Board of Canvassers that doesn't certify the election for the next several days. So
I'm glad we took care of the current, need for the election that we just had.
thank you.
It sounds like this one here, there's some question as to whether or not we want to do the after-hour stipend or just the whole arrangement, I don't know.
Yeah,
And it's new
someone needs to
information,
make a
so-
motion in a second, then I'd like to discuss it.
Well, we can discuss it without
Okay.
having that.
Hey, Trustee Massey, do you remember the last Thursday after our 4-hour one meeting, and then we met after for this? Do you remember the $25-50 on top of the $250?
This
Or-
is the same material I gave you that night. I'm sorry.
I don't remember discussing that, Kathy, or Clerk Lane, honestly, I do not remember. I remember giving them the bonus for the last election, I did not have an issue with it. But paying somebody $300 a day for an election, that's,
Trustee,
Yes, Mr.
Mr.
Massey?
Chair.
Yes.
Trustee Thomas, I had a sidebar conversation with Madam Chair, if you don't mind me saying this. Is it correct to say table this discussion until it gets on the agenda?
Point, because this issue's not on the agenda tonight, and it
Yes.
wasn't on the amended agenda either.
Yeah.
Right.
But in fairness, you did say this is something we want to take care of in the future, so we don't have a problem, so.
Well,
Correct.
If there's a
anybody have-
motion to table this or to address it at a
there's not
different
even a
time.
motion.
it sounds like, is there a consensus that we'd like to address this at
Later.
one of our future
Yes.
meetings?
Sure.
Yeah,
Ms.
Madam
Lane, is
Chair
there-
agreed, we had a sidebar conversation.
Yes, we
She
did.
said that we'll take it up
Okay.
at the next meeting whenever
Well,
she
okay,
has it on the
let's
agenda.
table this and bring
There's
it
not
up.
even a motion.
You don't have to table it,
Right.
it was never on.
Okay, so we will discuss that with Ms. Lane and her Clerk Lane as far as when we put that on the agenda.
Okay.
Okay, one of the last items is what you're hearing from the community. Mr. Mansour, anything for the good?
No, just more excitement building on the Ally Challenge.
More what?
Excitement building around the Ally Challenge, which is now
Yes.
just 2 weeks away, I guess.
Absolutely. Mr. Thomas?
No, but I would really like to thank Ms. Schmidt over there for correcting the person in the editorial on the pay on the parking for the Allied Challenge. Thank you very much. That was very nice of you.
That was very commendable. we actually lowered the price, and that was pointed out by Ms. Schmidt, that with regard to, in previous years with the Buick Open, that the parking rate actually dropped at $150, I believe. But we also dropped the need for having to go before the ZBA to get a parking permit. So we made it much more streamlined and less expensive. And at the same time, I received phone calls from residents that are upset that we're subsidizing things. Well, the only way that we can prevent subsidizing is by charging. And so we're charging what we feel is an appropriate cost, and we can't charge more than what the actual cost is. So we believe we're right in that range.
Right.
Mr. Guzak?
No, I'm just, the comments on the Ally Challenge is great. This is great that we had the Buick Open and it continued. I'm glad this is starting, and hopefully we can make it a great event.
Very good. Ms. Lane?
If any of you are reading the Detroit News or the Detroit Free Press, all of the clerks in the state of Michigan are dealing with what we call the Emily's FOIA request, where an individual or a group wants a copy of every ballot that was voted in November 2016, the AV applications, the AV envelopes, and for us, that was 21,500 voters and about 6,000 people who voted absentee. So I hope the state can find a reason. We'll do it if we have to, but it will take additional time of my new deputy and myself to
But
go
we're not
through
talking
that.
about any small task. We're looking at
Oh, that's an enormous task.
possibly a $40,000 tab for the copying and the work that's
Well-
involved. So it's going to be arduous task to even complete it.
Supervisor Bennett, a question on that,
Minister
what, or maybe Clerk Lane, what is our obligation to retain hard copies of these
ballots?
ballots?
Until
We
September
have to
22nd.
retain by federal law because it was a national election. It would, all the ballots are stored and all the information is stored until September 28th. Now they'll be kept until this matter is resolved.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, the question I have, you're talking about the actual ballots that everyone submitted?
The actual ballots that are 8.5 by 20 inches.
But the ones that are completed,
The
so this
one-
person, so if I FOIA it, I can find out how everybody voted? I thought that
Well,
would be
you
easy.
won't be able to tell who voted because the number that we pulled off the stub isn't there. But they want a copy of the marked ballots.
Okay, so the person's name won't be on there. or
No
there'll be
name.
No identification showing which resident actually did it, right?
Not on the ballot, but my even bigger concern, that's time consuming because,
But they're saying, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to clarify this.
Right.
They were saying they wanted the envelopes and all the paraphernalia, which somehow is gonna have residents' names on it, but
And
that's all being
signatures.
deleted, right?
well, all
If
of
it's
that
not, I don't
is,
think we should respond, that's,
I'm following the clerk,
I know.
the attorney's guidance, I'm following state law and FOIA law, and I am concerned. The ballots, we'll copy them, that'll take enormous time, and to do the whole ballot, I'll have to use 4 11 by 17 sheets of paper. But the envelopes and the applications with your signature, your date of birth, a barcode with other information, I don't like doing, and nobody said we can scratch all that out yet.
Mr. Laddie's been intimately involved in this whole issue.
Yeah, and it's developing, right? So we haven't arrived at
Ongoing.
decisions. But we're looking at what our obligations are, both in terms of redaction of information and providing information, and we'll keep you informed. I think it's gonna take, and again, just so you know, we did send an extension out because of these very issues that we're dealing with, and a lot of communities are. And so we probably won't have our definitive response until, well, we'll have some form of response in the next 10 business days, but we'll keep you up to date on it.
So just a quick question, would a individual citizen be able to file a invasion of privacy
Lawsuit.
matter against this?
Well, that's an interesting point, because we're getting direction on this matter from the Secretary of State, and also there isn't a lot of direction on this topic in the Freedom of Information Act. But between the theories of the Secretary of State and the basic premises of privacy laws and redaction, it's possible that someone could do that. some could say that some element of this has resulted in some invasion of privacy. Because again, we're not following like a flow chart with this type of request, so we're in an interesting area.
I think you gave Mr. Mansour an idea.
They're gonna have your voter record.
Mr. Massey, anything you have?
No.
Okay, Mr. Limita?
Signature, your
Mr.
voter
Laddie, anything
record,
further?
driver's license number. your
Mr.
address.
Chairman, I move that we adjourn.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
She beat you this time, you notice that?
They might have my driver's license,
Well,
might have,
We
who
gotta
knows what
block
they
all
have.
that.
You're
Oh, yeah.